Hi, this is Dr. Gregory Sadler. I'm a professor of philosophy and the president and founder of an educational consulting company called Reason.io, where we put philosophy into practice. I've studied and taught philosophy for over 20 years, and I find that many people run into difficulties reading classic philosophical texts. Sometimes it's the way things are said or how the text is structured. But the concepts themselves are not always that complicated, and that's where I come in. To help students and lifelong learners, I've been producing longer lecture videos and posting them to YouTube. Many viewers say they find them useful. What you're currently watching is part of a new series of shorter videos, each of them focused on one core concept from an important philosophical text. I hope you find it useful as well. Jean-Paul Sartre's play, No Exit, is one of the classics of existential literature, and what's going on in there is he's illustrating, using these three main characters who we'll talk about in a moment, some of the main themes having to do with the nature of the human person and our relations with other people, and about whether, in fact, we can ever be happy. One of the things that you should ask about this play, and it's sort of an open question, is whether he's attempting to depict the human condition as such, or whether this really is only the bad people that this sort of thing would happen to. And the answer seems to be leaning towards the side of this is the human condition as such, just set in a particularly crystallized manner that allows us to see its features most clearly. It's, as far as plays go, something that very much fits the classical unities, time, setting. The characters themselves, in a certain respect, are unities, as unlike other plays in which characters might actually develop. There's not a lot of development going on. There's just revelation of who these people are. And it is set in such a way as to make it impossible for these characters not to engage each other. So let's look at the characters first, and we're gonna look at these in greater detail and going over some of the key passages. But first we want to get the three actually set up. So at the beginning there's actually what we could call a ancillary character, the valet, who may or may not be one of the devils, certainly works there. He's not part of management, as he says. And he escorts Garcin into this room. And Garcin is a newspaper man from Rio de Janeiro in Brazil. He is a pacifist. Another thing that we can say about him that gets revealed through this is he's also a womanizer. He has interesting relationships with his wife that we'll explore. Another thing that you can say about him from the very beginning is that he's introspective. He is concerned with how he thinks of himself and how other people think of him as well. Then we have Inèz. She's the next character to come in, again escorted by the valet, and she is a postal clerk. She's a lesbian, and she describes herself in other people's words, but in words that also seem to fit her own self-conception, as a damned bitch. And she will talk about her cruelty. As a matter of fact, one of the first things that she says that's in the sort of long discourse at the beginning is that she knows what torturers look like because she's seen her own face in the mirror. Then third we have Estelle. And Estelle has died very recently. She's also younger than these other two. She's a person who came from the lower class, or maybe lower middle class, married into the upper class, kind of a common phenomena in Sartre's own time as well as, still in the present. And she seems very superficial at the beginning. It turns out that there is some depth to her, but it's the more that we go into it, the less you're going to like it. So these three are set up with each other. In a certain way, each of them represents a personality type. Inèz is a sadist, but not the kind of sadist who, goes about getting people that they can subject to their own whims and wills in a systematic way, just the kind of person who picks constantly. Garcin is somebody who's in delusion about his own status as a man. Estelle is you might say coquettish. She constantly needs other people to be affirming her own value, and those other people need to be men. And so putting these three together sets up a dynamic, an unstable dynamic, but a dynamic that's always guaranteed to pan out for the worse. Enough, though, to give them hope at certain points. And it's interesting. We see this arise at several different points, the possibility of there being a solution, most often proposed by Garcin, at one point proposed by Inèz. I suppose you could see what Estelle is proposing at a certain point as being a kind of solution as well. And all of these come crashing down. And they all come crashing down because of who these people are and the fact that they can't escape each other. So this is a good place to talk about the setting. And I put timelessness there rather than eternity because these characters do exist in time, but it's a time that simply can't end, and it's a time where things begin to lose there's a slippage that's occurring between the time of this place and the time of the world that we know. They're put into a drawing room in Second Empire style, something that we probably, most of us, can't relate to as a description. Just think about, really, I suppose, for imagining this, any sort of gauche, kitschy kind of environment would work, and a drawing room is where you would meet together and talk and do that sort of thing. So it's not a room set up for dinner. It's not a room set up for putting on your makeup. It's not a room set up for dancing or anything like that. It was very common to have drawing rooms in old-fashioned houses. This is where you might actually meet your guests and sit and talk for a while. And in many places, they would be decorated in a rather overbearing kind of style. And this one seems to be like this. So that's what the place is like. There's actually what, I think Garcin used the word an abomination. There's an abomination on the mantelpiece, which is some brass thing. Much more interesting is the fact that these characters, not only can they not leave the room, although we'll see that there is one opportunity for that, they can't sleep and they can't cry. These are things that the dead no longer can do. As a matter of fact, Garcin observes that they don't even have eyelids. They're not able to blink. They're not able to close their eyes. They're not able to change their condition in any way. And the crying means that they're unable to make a kind of progress in emotional terms, in relational terms, because to cry means to actually allow there to be some sort of outward sign of the anguish or regret or realization within. They all get there, and each one of them is expecting hell to be hellish. They expect burning coals and pincers and racks and stuff like that. The sort of things that are depicted in cartoons and in old paintings, or say in traditional writings about hell, like say Dante's Inferno. And they're all surprised to find out that there isn't anything like that they're just going to be stuck in this room with each other. So the question then, this is the central preoccupation of the entire book, or the entire play, what makes it hell? What makes this particularly hellish? And the answer that's given at the very, very end is that hell is other people. Now, if you're kind of a misanthropic person or somebody who's been disappointed all the time or very irritable, or if you're caught in certain circumstances, if you're stuck in a culture that is particularly anti-intellectual or anti-artistic, maybe this would, be something that you could identify with right away. And there are passing times where, because of the situation that we're in, imagine getting onto a crowded subway, then you could think, yeah, hell is other people. Or dealing with all sorts of unpleasantness coming from the needs, desires, preoccupations of others, then that makes sense. But is this something that holds, is Sartre trying to say that this is the case for everybody? At that point, we want to ask the question, why? Why is hell other people? And if we look at the characters who finally have this realization, mouthed by Garcin, but assented to by the others, we want to ask, why is this the case? And I think that it's worthwhile to reflect a bit on traditional conceptions of hell. If we get away from the fire and brimstone and eternal physical tortures, and we think about other models of what hell consists in. A lot of theologians have framed hell in terms of separation from God. And you could say, well, that's, maybe you don't like God, so maybe that's not so bad. What would be the problem with it? Well, in hell, you are on your own. If you're cut off from God, and you're cut off from, in some respects, the rest of the world, you're entirely cast upon your own resources, your own memories, your relations with other things. And in hell, you can't change. You can't grow. Now, it's not like purgatory, as say Dante portrayed it, where you are gradually purified of the stains of what you've done wrong, and you become a better person. Once you're in hell, you are stuck with who you are for eternity. And over the course of eternity, whatever illusions you have about, the good person that you are, or that you didn't really mean to do this over here, or that, if things had just turned out differently here, your great intentions would have been known. All of that gets stripped away from you. And we see that happening over the course of this play. In different ways, particularly with Estelle and Garcin. Inèz, in a certain way, is somebody who doesn't hope and is already more accommodating towards being in hell, and we'll see why. So I think the next thing that we want to do is look at each of these three characters in turn and think about the kind of person that they are, that's revealed in their discussion with these other people. And what's really noticeable about this is that really no action, no significant action takes place in here. Everything is taking place through words.